There's a great deal of speculation about whether former Vice President Joe Biden will announce his candidacy for the 2020 general election. Now, considering Biden's recent actions, which include speaking to potential donors, it's pretty clear to me that he's likely to announce his intent to run soon. Last week on No Filter, we went through the history of Bernie Sanders and his political career to see whether he's been sincere or consistent on the issues that matter the most to Americans, or at least the issues that matter the most to progressives. Today, I want to examine Biden's political career, which has been a long one. Let's start with the issue of campaign finance reform. The following video is from 1974, when Biden was a relatively new senator out of Delaware.
The system does produce corruption, and I think implicit in the system is corruption, when in fact, whether or not you can run for public office, and it costs a great deal of money to run for the United States Senate, even from a small state like Delaware, you have to go to those people who have money, and they always want something.
Well, I wonder whether you would feel that there's some virtue in forcing candidates to go out and try to raise money. I've heard people, probably people who didn't run for office, say that it's uplifting to go out and try to get money. Do you think that there's something unuplifting about putting a limit to how much you can ask one man to give you?
I think it's the most degrading experience in the world to have to go out and ask for money, because you know that unless you accidentally agree with the position taken by the person or group that has the money, that you run the risk of deciding whether or not you're going to prostitute yourself to give the answer you know they want to hear in order to get funded to run for that office.
All right, some pretty strong words there. Now remember that video was from 1974. 2 years later, the Supreme Court actually loosened campaign finance regulations in Buckley v. Vallejo. Biden didn't have anything to do with that, but how does he feel about campaign finance today? Is he consistent on this issue? Well, recently The Hill published an article titled, "Biden Seeks Donors as He Eyes Presidential Bid." In the article, those close to Biden say he's trying to get the money necessary to start off with strong funding as soon as he launches his campaign. A Biden ally told The Hill, quote, "It's a priority. If you don't have a good second quarter showing, that could be problematic." During his calls with donors or potential donors, Biden mentions that he was the only surrogate who could campaign in both blue and red states. And look, each candidate should campaign in blue and red states, regardless of which party they represent. But I get the sense that Biden believes he can work with Republicans in bipartisan compromises, which was a mistake that Obama made again and again and again. I'm not the only one who wants to see a Democratic fighter rather than someone who just wants to compromise for a party or compromise with a party, I should say, that has no interest in bending their views. Biden recently got a lot of heat from the left, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, for making it seem like Vice President Mike Pence isn't the anti-freedom right-wing religious zealot that he really is.
The guy is a decent guy, our vice president, who stood before this group of allies and leaders and said, "I'm here on behalf of President Trump." And there was dead silence.
Maybe there was dead silence because the world doesn't see Mike Pence as a decent guy. But okay, look, I know this is a giant tangent and we should get back to money in politics. Bernie Sanders has raised a lot of money from small dollar donors rather than millionaires and billionaires. And maybe Biden was doing the same when he reached out to donors. Maybe he was reaching out to small dollar donors, except he wasn't. He's going in a completely different direction. The Hill writes that, quote, "Last fall, Biden lit up the crowd," as one donor put it, when he appeared at an intimate Los Angeles fundraiser co-hosted by Hollywood heavyweight Jeffrey Katzenberg and other Democratic bundlers. Democratic strategist Brad Bannon adds that, quote, "Biden has to rely on fundraising events and big donors who are suspect in the minds of rank and file primary voters who abhor big money in politics." So it appears that the issue of political corruption isn't one that Biden cares enough about to practice what he preaches or preached several decades ago. All right, so let's move on to the issue of income inequality. During Biden's 1988 presidential run, he spoke out against the way the middle class and the poor were being neglected by our lawmakers. And he had some strong words in favor of funding public education.
We can make an education system work, and it's not working now. We can, in fact, do something about the dread of nuclear war. We can deal with our trade problem and promote American jobs that pay real money, not poverty wages. We can do all this and much more. The next president of the United States has a phenomenal opportunity to make a contribution to this country in a way that's going to make life better for our children.
Biden continued presenting himself as a warrior for the poor during his 1988 presidential bid.
It seems to me that when we got involved in the civil rights movement, Frank, nobody asked Martin Luther King what his legislative agenda was. He marched to change attitudes. When the women's movement started, it did not move with a constitutional amendment. They marched to change attitudes. And this party better understand full well that it's about time we change our attitude and we begin to change the attitudes of Americans about what their responsibilities are to the poor, about what their responsibilities are to other people, and about what our responsibility in the world is. And that requires changing attitudes.
All right, so did Biden's attitude change? Fast forward to 2018, and Biden still argues that he's looking to do something about income inequality. I mean, sure, he's had plenty of opportunities to do something considering he was first elected into the Senate in the 1970s when he was 29 years old, and had the opportunity to serve in the executive branch as Obama's vice president. Maybe he'll get around to it this time around. But in order to solve the issue of income inequality, you have to tackle its root causes, like the ruling elite who donate money to Biden's campaigns. Is he willing to do that? Let's hear from Biden in May of 2018 to find out.
We have to deal with income inequity. I love Bernie, but I'm not Bernie Sanders. I don't think 500 billionaires are the reason why we're in trouble.
If a politician claims they want to do something about income inequality in America, they can't simultaneously pretend as if the top 1%, which exploits legalized bribery to ensure politicians keep their taxes low, aren't the problem. Come on. Finally, I wanted to briefly cover an issue that could be a problem for Biden as the primaries heat up. When Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas was nominated in the 1990s, he faced sexual harassment allegations from Professor Anita Hill. Much like the Kavanaugh hearings, Hill was asked to testify before the Senate, where Biden, along with a panel of all-male senators, asked her a number of uncomfortable questions.
It is appropriate to ask Professor Hill anything any member wishes to ask her to plumb the depths of her credibility. Can you tell the committee what was the most embarrassing of all the incidences that you have alleged?
I think the one that was the most embarrassing was his discussion of pornography involving these women with large breasts and engaged in a variety of sex with different people or animals. That was the thing that embarrassed me the most and made me feel the most humiliated.
And every expert comes forward and says there's a pattern. It doesn't happen in isolated incidents, it's a pattern. If there's not a pattern, to me, that's probative. That has some dispositive weight. No one's proved a pattern here of anything. We're not finished yet, but no one's proved a pattern. Again, these people have decided already once and for all they're for you or against you. You need better lawyers. You need to hire me.
With the Me Too era in full swing, Biden's involvement in those hearings has come back to haunt him already, and he addressed critics in a recent interview.
I wish I could have done more to prevent those questions the way they asked them. I hope my colleagues learned from that. My biggest regret was I didn't know how I could shut you off if you were a senator and you were attacking Anita Hill's character. Under the Senate rules, I can't gavel you down and say you can't ask that question, although I tried. And so what happened was she got victimized again during the process.
It seems like you get it now versus back in 91.
Well, I think I got it in 91. I don't think it, well, people have their own opinion.
Wait a minute. Did Biden just say he tried to stop senators from asking Hill certain questions? That's funny because if you go back and look at the tapes, you see something completely different.
It is appropriate to ask Professor Hill anything any member wishes to ask her to plumb the depths of her credibility.
Well, we're definitely plumbing the depths of your credibility right now, Biden. Biden's line of questioning was a little different for nominee Clarence Thomas. At one point, Thomas mentioned how he was convinced that every referee involved in a football game between the Cowboys and the Redskins was really a Redskins fan. But it's his hope that the referees, much like the senators in the hearing, would be impartial and fair. Here's how Biden responded.
Dallas Cowboys or the Redskins?
I'm a lifetime, I've been a Dallas Cowboys fan for 25 years.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We've got a solid answer.
Speaking of getting solid answers, that's exactly what we as voters should expect from every single candidate. Where do they truly stand on the issues? It's easy to say you're in favor of getting money out of politics. It's very trendy these days to pretend like you want to do something about the ever-widening gap between the rich and the poor. But actions speak louder than words. And fortunately, candidates like Biden have a long political record we can dissect. Just remember, talk is cheap. Oh, did you like that video? Well, that's great, because you never have to miss another episode of No Filter. All you have to do is just hit the subscribe button below and ring the bell to get notified whenever we publish a new video.